You're telling me all about MBAS.
Yeah, you were sorely missed at
Oh my
MBAS.
gosh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
we
mean, just
missed
to
you a
hear about
lot.
how everybody came together, just to.
Oh my gosh, it was just unbelievable. Yes.
And I have to tell you guys about Flipgrid. I don't know if your kids are using it. Wait, I think Keith is the only one here who has kids. But yeah, it's what all kids use nowadays in the classroom. You know, how do you get everybody in the classroom to participate at the exact same time? Well, you have them record their segment to show that they learned something, and that exact same thing could be used for those videos that you all had made, saying that you're power addicts. Yeah, it's like all in one.
Nice.
You click the button, record, and it's just all like a grid, literally a grid. Yeah, so that's something that we can try, and I think everybody could sign up for it, not just educators. Like,
Cool.
I'm not not officially part of a school anymore, but I signed up and I just put down my company as Microsoft.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, school
I
district.
think I have looked at it before, but yeah, I don't remember now.
Yeah.
Seen it.
Okay.
Flipgrid. Yeah.
Right.
So what time is it from?
In 3 minutes. So I guess we need to ping Yusuf.
No, it's not making the sound, Keith. Saw that though.
Okay, some people are saying they're not able to find the link and stuff, so let's see.
Oh, really?
Anton was telling me. I'm gonna put this Teams link directly.
Okay.
Hey, Lori.
Hey there. How are you?
Hey, welcome.
Hey, Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Good to see everybody.
Yeah, good to hear you as well. Okay.
What's happening?
Hold on, let's see if I can make it work. 1 second.
Dude, that is extraordinary. I honestly can't tell that it's a green screen. Like, there's no clue.
There we go.
Sitting in the Royal Albert.
Wow. So what do you call that background? Where is this? Like an
I have
opera
no
house
idea.
somewhere?
Ask Bing. They'll tell you.
That's the Royal Albert Hall, dude.
Yeah, I figured since I'm not singing, I would deal with this today. All right, so I'm gonna move this up so I can see what the heck I'm looking at.
Still waiting for Yusuf, and for those who are joining, I guess we'll start in a few minutes. Waiting for Yusuf.
So is Yusuf here yet? Did he
What's
join?
that? No, I
do we
don't
have
see him yet.
I don't know. Do we wanna like ping him and
That's
check?
what I'm trying to do here.
Oh, you already did. Okay.
Okay, he said joining now.
Yes, they're joining now.
Cool.
Alright.
There it is.
There it
Okay.
is.
Yeah. See him.
All right.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Yusuf.
Hey.
Hey,
Hi.
We can hear you fine. And can you hear us fine?
Yeah, I can hear you guys perfect.
Okay.
Cool.
Beautiful.
All right. I guess we can get started. So, Keita, we'll put it on you again.
Again.
Keitha, take
All
her
right.
away.
All right. Well, we are back for the October 2019 Power Addicts Global Hangout. And we cannot believe that we're just 2 months away from our 1 year anniversary. It's been 1 year since we started our first Hangout. And we are just incredibly amazed at how much the Power Addicts community has grown since then. And it's still growing. But for today's Hangout, we have a very special guest joining in the chat space if you haven't guessed already. Where is the special guest? Thought we just saw him.
Brian, we are talking about you. You know.
Well, Brian, welcome back. We are all extremely happy to have you back, and the Twitter world has not been the same without you. And I'm sure everybody here agrees on that, and I can't wait to see how excited everybody's going to be on the chat.
Thanks for the fireworks behind you.
Yes. See, that's why I picked it. Yeah. Well, and today we have a very creative power addict joining us today, which is this is Yusuf. And Yusuf, where are you joining us from?
Hey, guys. I'm in Southern California, Laguna Beach.
Cool. Yeah. And if
County represent.
Yeah.
yeah. And if you haven't checked out his uber cool apps, make sure you do. His design tips and power apps tips and tricks on how you can design apps close to native looking apps is just amazing. There's a lot to learn from there, and it has inspired all of us to up our power apps design game. And Yusuf, we can't wait to see what you've got to share with us, and it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you. So for those who, I mean, most of you probably don't know who I am. So I'm probably just some random person.
You know your
Basically,
apps.
yeah.
You're a power
Basically,
addict, so that's what we need to know. That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you guys see, if you're on Twitter, obviously, I started posting recently. But basically, I started off as a designer. I went to school for both design and journalism. And so I was kind of half writing articles for a newspaper and then also doing their layouts for the newspaper. And I always had like a huge interest in design and art and everything creative. But, I had those parents that were kind of like, that's not a real thing to focus on. And so I was kind of like, what else am I going to get into? So I did journalism, which ended up being the worst thing to also go for. But luckily I evolve fast and I adapt. I kind of realized I was writing for a magazine in California on surfing. And I basically just had this like surf blog and super into it, was doing all the designs and writing these articles. And then I just moved on to something different and worked at Quicksilver. And working as a designer there, one day someone was like, you're super organized and super technical, like maybe you can manage the team. So then I got into being kind of a creative project manager. And then from there, just into business operations. And so working with business applications and process, you start to learn that there's so many great tools out there and you have millions of needs for different companies. I mean, you're always constantly trying to find which tool will solve our process and make life easier for all users. And sometimes you will customize a tool. Other times you're just like, how I can't get this to work. You make so many customizations to make it fit a process, but it still doesn't feel super easy and intuitive to users. So then when Power Apps came out, it was kind of felt more like a way to customize forms and workflow. And so I started getting to that because I just was at a point where I couldn't solve certain process issues for this company. And I needed another way to do this and something fast, something where it wasn't going to take me crazy amount of hours to get this going. And so Power Apps I started playing with a little bit. I've used other low code tools similar to it, but Power Apps, I really like the idea that it's already connected to Office 365, which saves you a lot of time when you're trying to integrate all of your data together. And so that was a huge selling point. And when I got into it, I was like, cool, wow, I can solve, let's say, a time off request, which I think at the time that was like the first thing I did. And this company was doing a PDF that you had to fill out, submit, and get like signed online, and then email it to HR. So it was like really whack, out of date process. And I was like, maybe that's a simple enough process to try out in Power Apps, and put the app together. And then my first thought was, this kind of looks like something I built, as in like it wasn't really like, it didn't look great. And I just knew people are going to come into it thinking, oh, cool, another janky looking tool that operations is making us use. And I knew there was flexibility into the app, but at the beginning, you know, you're just kind of getting used to what you can do and what the possibilities are. And so after some time, I was like, all right, let's see what I can do. Let's really push limits on how I can solve business process, but let's also use my design to make this user friendly and make people not feel like they don't want to jump into this tool, because working a process, usually no one is excited to try a new tool and no one's excited to follow a process. So if you can make it at least user friendly, appealing, quick, and accessible, you're going to have an easier time to adapt. And so then I really started focusing on where can we improve UX and UI in Power Apps. And then that's kind of when I got into, just the last month, I decided to make a Twitter and get involved in the community, because I just feel like I hear a lot of other people say, well, Power Apps, they're not cool looking and they don't look like a native app, but you just kind of got to embrace your creative side and go over some basics on UX and design. And I think when you kind of get the basics and you keep that in mind, then use a little bit of your creative side, you can see that you can really make this a great tool for you. And so what I was debating what we can go over without me rambling too much, because I do ramble a lot and I nerd out and want to cover everything. So I thought maybe what we will do is go through some of the basics, and I'll show you how just to take a quick Power Apps template and add a little bit of your own design element to it. So let me share my screen.
Yeah, I hear you're not the first person who's said that they started with like a leave request app as their first one. I think somebody tweeted that to me yesterday. Yeah, very popular use case.
Yeah, I feel like you know what it was is like I think what started was, how do you get rid of like paper forms? And so you'll start finding all these other type of form tools, and Power Apps started showing up in the search results, because this was like 2016, 2017 when it just came out. And so I think a lot of form tools are being popular, and there's some that are really great, easy. You can probably make them faster than Power App, but you're limited to the capabilities you have. You can't truly add dynamic functionality and really good conditional logic to make these apps even better. And so I think that's what makes Power Apps stand out, is yes, it might take a little more work to put the form together, but what you'll be able to do will be way more beneficial to your process and your end users.
I liked your point, Yusuf, about the apps not looking like apps, like they don't look very good. And I had that argument with someone at the weekend, well, not argument, conversation. And I said, well, you know, look, if you spin up a traditional bit of code, what does that look like?
Exactly.
It looks like it's a blank sheet of paper. You've got to start from scratch. At least you've got to start off a 10 here with Canvas apps, and it just requires you to do a little bit of extra work. Everything up until making it look nice has been actually rather simple. You know, you'd spent months writing code traditionally to get your app just working, and all of a sudden it's a bit too easy, and you know, you've got to spend a bit of time making it look good.
Exactly. And it's exactly how I feel, just because even getting into like, let's say I'm huge on Mac, so I like building off of Swift, and even that, like I can go find sample codes to help me get there, but those are just templates to help you get somewhere. I never look at a template as a done solution. You just roll in your data and call it a day, because that's not the reason why you went to a custom solution. You went there to make it your own and make it something that's going to solve your business process issues or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish within your app. So which tab am I in? Sorry, I have like so many browser tabs open, so I'm just make sure you guys can see that I'm in Power Apps now, right?
Yes.
Cool. So what I did is just put a quick SharePoint list together, aiming for a work order. So the idea was you just need to make a work order form for a creative team. And so you're submitting the work order so that the project managers or resource managers can assign a team and get that project in their queue. And all I did was start off with the auto generated Power Apps template when you start with data. And what you'll see is when you do that, you get your basic, you get your gallery with a few of the items shown in here. You got your 3 labels. You can click into it to view that form. You can go back, and then you have a refresh, a sort, a new item, and then a search bar. And so when it comes to forms, I really take a step back because I try not to jump straight into an app, even though sometimes I think, well, I've done it 1,000 times, I can jump straight into it. You really want to take a step back and figure out what is it that I'm trying to solve here. And so for me, when I come into this, my first thought is this is going to have a status to it. So these work orders are going to go from submitted to assigned to in progress to completed. And so I'm going to want to have some sense of status here. And depending on the volume of the work orders going through, chances are my user's not going to want to just search by the project name. They're going to want to have a little more flexibility to quickly find the information they need on the work orders they've already submitted. And then sort, for me personally, if I'm going to have some kind of filter option in my form or sorting, usually I'm not just sorting, let's say by title, unless it was something where I'm going through a directory or something where it makes sense. You really have to think of how is your user to come in here and search, and then with these icons, again, think of who your users are. If I'm thinking of, let's say, Roxa, which is a marketing company that I work with a lot, I know they're not the most tech savvy people. They're more on the sales side. And so everything I do, I want it to be super straight to the point. And so what I'm going to do is let's make a few tweaks to this. Let me see if I can. There we go. So I'm going to get rid of this lovely box in the background. And surely I'll break something here. I'm going to get rid of the search as well. So I'm getting rid of everything basically on the top. And so by default, the gallery has filters to it when you start off like this. And so you're going to see that it's based off of that sort button and the option to search the title. And I don't really even use the title field. If you're ever using SharePoint as your data source, it always defaults a title field. I actually just make that not required, and I never really use it because it's just too generic, and it's hard for me when I'm trying to quickly map out fields. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Yusuf, I have a question for that gallery. It has that @ symbol. Are you using some disambiguation for the items property there?
No, you know what? I literally just saw that when I turned it on, and I've never seen it there before. So I don't know if it's a new update because I clicked, create from data, and I haven't really done that in a super long time. But
okay.
For some reason, it made me freak out too. So I went to my other apps, and I'm like, is it everywhere? And it's only here when I click the template.
Yesterday, I created an app from data as well. I noticed the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it must be something new. But yeah, it only seems that if you create it from data, and like I said, I haven't really used that functioned in a long time, so I don't know if it's something new.
Okay.
All right, so then
This is how long I've been away.
what you want to have, like, for me, it's like I just want to be straightforward with the user, what screen they're on. So I wouldn't really call this, you know, work orders or creator requests. You know, this page is specifically going to show, I want to show that user's request so that they're not having to filter through a bunch of other people. So I'm just going to label this guy my request. I'll try not to get too picky because of time, but I'm just going to make it bold. And now with apps, I think my biggest pet peeve, and I think it's a really great thing to put in your designs, is finding what your borders are. And so when it comes to like a phone layout or anything really, I don't know why this number, I mean, I think it is pretty standard, but I just go by 8s, so 8 pixels. So my borders, I'll usually do 32, because if I'm on the phone, I don't want it too close to the edge. And so if I have this here, I'm going to adjust it to 32. And I feel like that's always been, for me, a really safe border to go by, especially as you get into, you know, adjusting for different devices. You really don't want that app to be hanging too close to the edge. And then so from 32 is my margin, and then I use 16 pixels to kind of space out stuff. So I'll try to make my labels space out in 16s, you know, different sections. And then when it gets to something closer, I'll do 8s. I really don't do four because that's just getting way too close. And I think sometimes when you see some of the apps I'll see, and especially some templates, you know, there's a little inconsistency. So if you kind of follow that rule, you'll see your apps look very clean because you kind of followed a strict margin and guide. I usually just will create a square icon with, you know, no fill and a red border, and use that as my guide through my app, like, which is something great. If PowerAddicts would add that, is some kind of grids in there, that'd be super helpful. But that's a way to kind of solve your grids. And go ahead and put a background here. I usually like to go for, I think my like default kind of design is always going with like a light gray background and using white containers or white cards, things like that. I think it just looks nice and clean. I feel like I'm also the only person in the world that's like not into dark mode. I wish I was. I'm just not super into it.
That is not a popular opinion.
Yeah,
We won't hate you for that. Sorry.
Wait, we did see one of the apps. I remember seeing one of your apps, which was kind of looking like the sales one. It looked like dark mode to me.
Yeah, like I had to actually had a client request it to be in kind of a dark mode. And it was hard for me to get into because I was like, oh, it's so hard for me to look at everything so dark. And I do think there's some obviously really great designs people do, but for me, it was kind of hard to get used to. But it was,
I do see a use for dark mode, especially if there are apps that are being used where, you know, lighting is not, you know, like especially at fields or at manufacturing units and places like that.
Right.
If lighting is not, you know, where at the expected level, then it might help pop out the font and the text with the dark mode.
Totally. Yeah, and I mean, I think one thing I started doing is I'll create wherever you store your data, I'll make a project settings list so that users can save all of their different options. And so I'll have in there kind of, do they want it always to be in dark mode? Because if you can save data on a mobile, but if you're using your apps, let's say on a desktop layout, you're gonna see that it won't save data. So a workaround is what I do is I have a list, and depending on the amount of users you have, you know, usually these are built for people less than 500. You can, you know, adjust limits and you can make your data work for more. But it's a pretty simple way about going about it, so that when a user logs in, they can have different default settings to cater to what they want to see. And it's really helpful if you're doing something like client related. I'll usually make a my clients fields where they can go ahead and select their clients. Every time they go in, they see just those instead of having to search it every time. And so all I've done here is I've gotten rid of the little, I don't know what you can call that kind of icon to indicate to go into viewing this, and as well as a separator, because all I'm going to do is add a background card in here and just give it a nice little clean look. Actually use the button. And the reason why I use the button is because I can adjust the radius to give those different edges. It usually defaults to 10, but I like to go more like anywhere between 4 to 8. I just like the little more sharper corners. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this out. Oh, just kidding, I didn't want to do that.
To that point, I guess Sancho's template that he published on the community, that is something that everyone should look out for, where you can just decide the default border radius, default these things, so that whenever you insert a button, it just comes up with that border radius. So yeah, that was a great post. So Sancho, I don't know if you can put a link in the chat for that. That would be helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, will do.
And so I'm just going to make this, see if I remember how to do 32 times 2, even though it's an easy one, but just making sure I kind of have that border in here. And send to the back. And so you'll start seeing that I've now have made this to fall under here instead of doing it by separator. I think one of the biggest things is I try not to reinvent so many designs. I constantly am using like every app, even if I don't personally use it for any purpose. I just will have like every app on my phone. I mean, my phone's a mess. There's so many apps on there, but you really just want to look at what you use every day and see what people are used to, because you want your app to feel like there's a familiarity with it. You don't want someone to come in here and be like, wait, okay, so let me figure out how this app works. Where's the navigation? Where's this? What's clickable? What's not? You know, just look at the things you use every day and make notes of what do you like instinctively do. And so I think a lot of designs right now, they're kind of either going to be a table design or this kind of card gallery where it's clear for them they can view an item and select it. And now this is like, of course, there's way more to do than just these like quick little edits I'm doing, but just as a way of showing that this is, you don't have to put that much effort into making adjustments to your app. You can really just quickly come into a template. So if you are kind of a newer user, make these clean edits, come in here and just feel like you have a little more of a cleaner design. So I'm going to go ahead and let's add, if this is my work orders, you can probably want to see when I submitted that. So let me just add a little calendar. I also love that this is not alphabetical order because I can never find what I want. So I'm just going to cheat and do it this way.
That's not a cheat. That's.
I mean, it's the way to go. I feel like I'm so glad they did that, but I'm still so used to going straight to icons, and then I kind of scroll back and forth until I find mine.
For those who haven't tried it yet, you could also go into the right-hand panel, and you could see the library if you use that drop-down.
And then I'm just using a calendar icon because, you know, where I can save labels to some of the text in the card. I mean, you want everything that's in the card to be super straightforward. You know, I look back sometimes of some of the first ones I put together. You kind of want to get so much information into those cards, and you really just want to make these super quick to digest, super easy for a user to come in and quickly see what this is, because they obviously can go into it and see the detail. So in nice ways, when you have something like submitted or calendar dates or anything like that, just throw an icon. It saves you the space of writing the label out. And I'm doing a really bad job of consistency on the font size, but I would definitely kind of pick what's going to be your standard font sizing you use and try to stay consistent with that. Usually what I'll do is I'll make a separate screen for all my colors and fonts and sizing and use that as a collection. That way, so if someone else wants to go in, let's say I make someone else an admin on this, they can go to that, make those adjustments without having to go straight into the app and do it. It gives a little more flexibility to other users being able to come in and customize. It will save you a lot of time.
What would you suggest people do in terms of like getting the sizing right? Because doing it on a screen at this kind of wacky resolution, which is a bit zoomed out, a bit zoomed in, do you export it to your phone sort of straight away and start looking at it if you're building a phone app just to get that sort of balance with the screen size right? So it's not, the text isn't too big, or do you kind of trust what the viewer is showing you? No, so I definitely have a kind of like a standard list I've been using. And I'll try to tweet it out maybe today. But it came from trial and error. So whatever I was using, let's say if I was making something for the phone, I would totally go in, just make sure those font sizes look normal. I also would go and compare other apps because I realized at first, I'm like, I was making everything huge. It looked normal. And then I go into my phone, I'm like, cool, I made like a grandma app. It's like super zoomed in. It looked like my grandma's cell phone. And I think you kind of forget too how small some other fonts are in apps. I'm always kind of surprised when I compare them and I'm like, whoa, I was way off, So it's trial and error, but I think there are some simple standards. And like I said, I'll tweet it out. I use pretty much the same stuff over and over on my sizing because it just seems to work. Yeah. Yeah, you kind of get that feel for, that the title should be, 18 and everything else should be a bit smaller and a bit smaller and a bit smaller and stuff. Exactly. And so then with this, I also want to show the status without adding more text to here. So what I'm just going to do is go ahead and add just a little status at the corner of this with a button and a square icon to kind of cheat filling in this corner with a color. So let me do this. And then I'll get into what color that is in a minute. Let's take that. And so obviously, I can't make that perfect shape with just one tool within PowerApps, but I can go ahead and come in here and really got to zoom in to make it align correctly. But this makes it so that you can kind of have that look. So you can have a curved box and still have a color indicator on the side. And it helps because, before I was kind of being lazy and just using non-curved rectangles, even though I wanted to, just to get it to fit perfectly. But that's the little workaround. And you can just group those together. As you can see, I just made the rectangle to fill the button. And so for the button, what I'll do is.
Okay, so that one's a cheat.
Yeah, that's a cheat. So I'm just going to go ahead and do, let's say, this item. Status, and hopefully I remember what statuses I used.
So Yusuf is using a switch statement here so that it could switch through each of those statuses more easily than a bunch of ifs.
Yeah, and it reads a lot faster too.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to these status colors as well, I mean, I think it's really important to look at what are your standard colors apps use for statuses. You know, if there's, you can definitely find people use some different stuff, but there are some standards where red is usually some kind of error. So usually if I'm going to have like a rejected status, I'll probably make it red. If I'm going to have something completed, something successful, it's green. Orange is usually caution, kind of making it a pending one. Blue is also one blue is usually kind of the pending and progress color. But what I'm doing here is this work order is going to go from submitted to actually being a in progress project to being completed. And so I'm kind of just using those standard colors.
I think what's nice, especially when you, I mean, I've been doing it a bit with CDS recently, is where you've got that relationship thing. It's so nice to put the hard-coded colors in the relationship, and then you've got like this kind of rich thing. So the status field isn't just a text field; it's not hard-coded in any one app, and you can get that consistency across all. That's quite an interesting way of doing it. And then the only thing you kind of got to do is if you've got you got to put some switches in there if you've got dark mode or beast mode enabled or anything crazy like that.
Do you have any kind of standard for like what kind of colors? I generally try to look at flat colors. I mean, I had go some flat color website and try to pick something like that. Do you kind of recommend something?
Yeah, like, I mean, I usually use, depending on kind of like what the tool is. I mean, usually there's a, pending and in progress, a completed and rejected. And I'll usually stick to a green for completed, blue for in progress, red for rejected or error. Orange, I've been kind of like using as a pending sometimes, but it's not typically the color used in most apps. And really what I look at are the different project management tools I use. So I'll go into kind of standard project management status documents, and you kind of see what colors they use.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's where I get kind of my coloring. So like I'll think of like what are the tools they're using and what are the statuses those tools use, especially if they have a team has their own project management tool or they have status documents to kind of like, again, you really just want to make this a familiar space to go to.
Sure.
Are there any sites or online resources that you use for your design inspirations? Like, I usually go to UI Movement or UIRecipes.com. So are there any such online resources that you usually go to for your design inspirations?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Usually I'm going through the most popular apps I use or most people use, and I kind of use that as my inspiration just because I want to make sure I'm creating something standard and then adding a little bit of design element. And so I think besides going through other apps, I mean, I really just Google search everything. I think it's kind of fun to just try to get creative on your own and just kind of, there's so much great inspiration you can get from the tools you use every day, and then kind of just see where your creativity can take it from there.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I mean, I sometimes look at the PayPal app or any of the bank apps and things like that, depending on the type of app you're building. You can kind of grab inspirations from, bits and pieces from each of those different apps out there.
Right. Totally. And so then what I would just add in here is just making a filter. And so what I want to be able to do is that I want people to be able to come in, see their specific requests. I mean, I would put a filter to the user to see everything they created, but also let them break down in statuses the different work orders they have. And so it just did this quick gallery. Actually, I need and typically I wouldn't just directly put this in. I would pull from that data source to get all of the statuses used. So this is not really like nothing I'm doing when it comes to this part is really best practice. It's just the quickest way to do it for right now. So let me actually add all request. I don't think I have in progress. I think I just made that up. And that's why you don't want to be guessing the wrong statuses that don't exist like I just did. So come here.
We're sure you have a table of all this stuff that you look up, but for the sake of this video,
Yeah,
we don't have time to fit it in.
I know. That's why I'm kind of just like hoping that I guessed correctly. And then again, just making it clear what is actually selected. And so I'll usually just have it do a set a global variable or just a variable for the screen to by default start with all requests. And usually how I would filter through that is just doing basically like an if statement. So I'd put, for this one, I'd probably just say, if all requests is that global variable, the status does not equal all requests, because I know nothing will have a status of all requests. And then I'll go into, if it's this, that color, or I mean, this is selected. So I would have that global variable. Let's say if my global variable is all request, if it equals this, I would have this be black and then the rest be gray to show that they're not the ones selected. And so then it lets your users be able to come in here and quickly filter through their requests that are in the various statuses. And I think typically falling under all requests is a good way to go. And then next, I remove that add button. And so for mobile, a floating like CTA button is kind of helpful. A lot of apps kind of use that now. So it is a familiar tool for people. The only thing I would say is when you're using a loading button, just be cautious of how you're using it on the data displayed. I think it's hard if there's like important information on the first glance that's being covered by this button. And so you'd want your gallery to have enough space so that that last item is not being covered by a button.
You called it a CTA button?
A CTA button. So it's just a call to action. I mean,
right.
It just would have more emphasis than a lot of your other buttons. And then there's 1,000 ways to do drop shadows, but I'm gonna just do a simple way without having to use any CFGs or HTML. I just go ahead and do, let's say, color value. And so your hex color has 6 digits, but then if you add 2 additional digits, you can play with the fade of it. And so I think I usually kind of do like 30 or 40%. Let's try 30.
Hey Geetha, do you have I think you put a blog out about drop shadows recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Geetha, you have a good one on HTML shadows.
Yeah, I think the approach I was using was more around not using images, just using HTML, div tags to generate the shadow. But I mean, you could totally use an image as well.
I think they're great components to make. When you make it, if you make it a component, because it just makes, yeah, like totally. Like make a rectangle with a drop shadow, button with a drop shadow. And when I can't remember, did you guys find out if they finally let them be put in galleries yet? Did they do that? Sort of like I avoid anything like that, like the plague. just know it's not going to work.
There's a separate website. It's not Microsoft's, but pcf.gallery, I think. It has both PC, I mean, the PCF part and the I don't know, but I think that's another website where you can look up some stuff.
Yeah, they have a lot of functionality that you do not have out of the box within Power Apps. Let's say you don't like how a control works, or if it's a simple text box and you want to make it do something fancy that you can get it to do out of the box with Power Apps, then you can build something using the PCF framework, which uses React behind the scenes, and put it out there for the gallery, and you can download a couple of them and use them in your apps.
Yeah, and so like what I will do, like if I'm just doing it with,
Nice.
using two similar icons, is I really just did 2 layers of the circle. The one up front is going to be the color of my choice, and then the one in the back, I did that kind of faded gray color, and then I usually will make it 2 to 4 pixels shorter in width, because whenever on your apps, like, I mean, sometimes if I'm embedding, let's say, SVGs or something, I may be lazy and throw the drop shadow I already had on it, which might be all around. But typically, when it comes to the apps, your drop shadow should be coming from top down, where you would see it at the bottom. I think a lot of times, again, if you use something quick and lazy, like I've done in the past, sometimes when you're just trying to get something out real quick, the default might shadow all around, and you're not really looking at the button that way in the app. So doing just a copy, making it a little shorter in width, and then dropping it down a couple pixels lower will give you a simple shadow. And then, so, I mean, I know I've spent a little time on this, so I'll try to go through quickly, but I think when it comes to forms, the other important thing is, let me go to something a little better than that one. So when you come into your forms, with form designs, I mean, I kind of have like some simple like rule of thumbs I try to follow, just to make it super easy for your users to come in here. Things like, especially on mobile, it should be one column. Most users will just read a form better if it's one column. There are times where, let's say if I'm doing something desktop, I do get tempted sometimes to make 2 columns, 3 columns, because you're trying to save space. But where you can, if your form's longer, where you feel the need to make 3 columns, it's usually just best to make it so that they can kind of go to a next screen, see the progress they have. I think just having a progress bar when you do that is also super helpful for a user to know, where they're at in the process, so they're not like, am I going on forever? But you'll read that most users they react better to a 1 column form than multiple columns. And then with labels, how the default works. A lot of users don't read side labels well. So, you have an option to kind of flip your labels in Power Apps, but users are more likely to read it from where it kind of falls into the default here. And then a lot of times you might see people try out making the field name the input text, and it's really kind of like, a lot of like designers will say it's the worst spot to put it, just because if someone fills something in and then looks back, they're not going to know what field that was for. So it's always good to just have that label still. And then if you're going to have, let's say, this is not a super long form, and so I might not break it out into multiple screens, but what you would want to do is group it with related data. So I might have just a header here that's going to be project details, and then, maybe deliverable information. And it just helps your user digest the information a lot faster.
Yeah, I tend to use a lot of tabs. So everything is on the same screen. Just switch between tabs and show different sections. I think that's also another way of doing it.
Yeah. So like, I think, tabs.
Anita has a great blog post on it. So have a look at that.
It's a long time back. Yeah, it was a very long time back. Yeah.
And then, the other things are like, whenever you have let's say, a drop down, I kind of do anything that has less than like 6 to 8 items. I just show all those. Users will be able to read it faster. It's less of a click. And so you can use something like a checkbox. You can use the list control to just show them. Sometimes like I will try to just make it a little more interesting looking by using, let's say if I have 3 options for a certain field, I may just have 3 buttons. So let's say if it's like low priority, medium priority, high priority, where they can select it. And just a lot of, when you look at a kind of UX research, it'll say kind of users will move a lot faster through your forms when they can see all the options. Of course, if it's going to be like more than 8, you would have a drop down. So if I'm going to have like selecting a project manager, pulling from everyone in the project management team, I'm not going to want to show that because it'll probably be a really long field. And then really just being cautious of the amount of fields you add. I mean, you really have to take a step back and just look at, do I really need this information? Where can I pull the information dynamically? Sorry, my dog's like howling me in the background if you hear him. But try to remove what you can. You know, in this example, like if I was having a project type and I have, let's say, website design or banner ads, and I have them select, you know, what deliverables are we doing? Are we doing the creative? Are we doing the copywriting? Are we doing the coding? I wouldn't make an additional field of which resources do you need, because based off those, I should be able to know that if I am doing the coding, I'm going to need the dev team. If I'm going to do the creative, I'm going to need the creative team. So just try to find where you can kind of save users the amount of fields. You know, forms are just going to work if they're just not exhausting. And I think when it comes to solving business process and you're working with, let's say, a sales team who's going to be putting the work order in for a project manager, the project managers are technical people who are going to probably want a 30 field form. And the salespeople are not the kind of people that are going to want to take the time to go through that. So you really just have to find a perfect balance and use Power Apps in a way that you can kind of fill out fields dynamically and use some kind of logic to that.
All right.
So we have a question from Mary Thompson. She asks, how do you all know how many actions you can have on a button? So he had a new form and navigate with a colon in between. What do I need to look up to learn more about this? Mary, you can unmute yourself as well and, you know, kind of elaborate on the question if you'd like.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was actually sending it like right before you asked it, and then it was like all at the same time. But so up there basically in the function area, I use pretty simple forms like navigate, right? And I feel like he had maybe some more complex ones. I think there was like an edited form, and then it was navigating and just kind of using, yes, exactly. I don't know how to kind of combine things or when I should be. So how can I build my skill set on that, or what is that?
Well, I mean, I think first you have to look at what is it you're trying to make the action do. You know, here what I'm doing is using that semicolon to separate these different actions here. So
Okay.
what I want is, if I'm doing a form, I want to indicate that I'm going to edit it, or I'm going to do a new form, or I'm going to view the form, because that makes it set the display mode of the form. It makes it a little easier instead of having, let's say, a screen for viewing the form only and a screen for editing the form only. Having this lets you go ahead and say, no, I'm going to edit, or no, I'm going to view, or no, it's going to be new, and saves you having to use an additional form screen. And then after I kind of have that, I'm using the semicolon to then have my form navigate. And so this is just separating the two different calls that I want to happen.
So it doesn't, I mean, PowerApps doesn't prevent you from having multiple kind of functions or multiple actions, basically. So you can have 5 things happening over there and you can just put a semicolon. But I guess it depends on what kind of requirement do you have. What are you trying to achieve from that button, right?
Yes.
In some cases, you want to patch, you want to add a record into your data, like SharePoint list. You want to use patch. And then after it is done that, you want to do something else. You want to use it to the next screen or do something else. So kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve with the button.
Yeah, and there's not really like a limit on number of actions you can have on the button either. But at the same time, you know, you don't want to overload it with, you know, in the upper like 20 different actions or more than that going on, because it can also kind of take a hit on the user experience.
Exactly.
And also with that, like if you're doing stuff across screens as well, like so if you come in and you've got your landing screen and you've got references to forms and stuff on other screens, all of that's going to load back to that first screen. So when you land on your first screen, you're going to see a real long load time, right? Because you're going to load the whole app. So it's much better to pass a variable to the screen, and then on visible of that screen, you have some functionality to set up the mode with which the app is in, or you can do it just by passing the variable in the navigate statement. And I find that makes it really snappy, because you like having a great looking UX is completely trashed if when you click on the button nothing happens. You put all that bloody work in, it looks absolutely damn sensational, and it looks absolutely sensational, man. This app, like I'm stoked to see it. You click on the purple button and it's like, and we sit and wait.
Yeah.
Just
And
adding
another
that.
Yeah, go
ahead, Geeta.
I know, I was just going to say another, like a pattern or practice that I usually follow is if I feel like that, the set of actions that I have on button click is going to take a while, I usually prefer to have some kind of an indication to the user showing something is in progress, or, just have a timer or something that waits, or have a variable that actually stores, okay, it's starting to process, and then when it's complete, update that variable, and then based off of that, show a confirmation, just so the user is aware of what's happening within that context.
Also, I guess just adding to that, if you want to actually run 2 or 3 actions at the same time, use concurrent. If your first action, like the second action is not dependent on the first action at all, it's just 2 separate actions that you're trying to achieve to the button, just you look up the concurrent function. You can basically do 2 things at the same time, and it kind of speeds up the process.
We have one more question. It's around, I think that's Brian. How do you do customizations, like having buttons instead of a drop down that without breaking the edit form, I end up bailing and building it from scratch? Or do you mean like having buttons to set the options for your drop down? Is that what you mean? Like still have the drop down within the edit form, but visually show buttons for the user to pick the options? And if you want, you can unmute yourself. And,
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yusuf said that if you've got eight options or less, it's best to throw a bunch of buttons in there for you to click. And yeah, I usually end up breaking the edit form, and so yeah, I'd love to know any tips there of how to avoid doing that.
Yeah. So whenever I have something like that, what I just do is I use variables. And so if I'm doing, let's say, a new form, I'm going to set the variable to blank, and I'm going to have, let's say we have low priority, medium priority, high priority. So I'm going to have 3 separate buttons, and because I can't put a gallery in here, that's why I'm using buttons instead. And so I'm having these 3 buttons listed, and based on the select, I'm doing a collection. And so I use like a collection, and then what I'm saving back, like if you look at, let's see. So this priority is just a text field in SharePoint. So by default, it's giving me a text field. And based on what the user select, I use a collection to then, using a form for concat to put in here, let's say low priority, or if it's something that's gonna have multiple selections, then concat, to have like item 1, comma, item 2, comma, and so on and so forth. But I find that the button has been the easy way to do it. It gets a little harder if obviously there's a lot more items, but if you have just 3, like I said, you can just use 3 buttons or less than 8 and use a collection, use a variable to show what's selected, what's been unselected, and then that way it'll make it easy. The easiest way is also too, if you are not making it multiple, then obviously it's just going to collect 1 option, and that makes it easier for you. But I haven't had really any issues using that method. There's times where I'm trying to get a little more complex, and it makes it more time consuming. But I think the buttons has been the easiest way I've gone about it.
I have a
Cool,
question.
thanks.
I have a question. You're dealing with forms, right? Like they take a long time to format. What tips have you got for speeding it up?
Yeah, so forms, I will say that's probably my least favorite thing to do is format. I actually have someone that works for me that I literally will put everything in and say, okay, can you do the rest of this? Because I just like, it is time consuming, but it's worth it. And what I do to save that is, depending on who is using this app, if it's something that it's going to be for, let's say, a company that's going to have multiple Power Apps, I'll use a list as kind of the style guide. So I'll have my fonts, I'll have, let's say, form text field, and I'm going to have, here's the font, here's the border color, here's this. And then so when the app starts, I run a collection just to kind of speed up that data and have it saved there. And then that way I can go in and just put, the font equals text field font. The color equals this. So that way, at least I do it once. And then if this happens to me so many times where a client says, oh, we actually, in the middle of this changed our company colors. And I didn't do it in the beginning. So I have to go back to every single thing and make it match. And it's such a nightmare. So doing that, you save, exactly. And then what's great about it is I can have a screen. So maybe this is gonna be standalone, and I can have a screen here that maybe I put a rule. So if someone's listed as an admin, they can go ahead, adjust it without having to go into the app and adjust any kind of collection or anything like that. So it makes it kind of nice for them.
I mean, I've used like kind of parent.border and parent.this and parent.that to sort of like control it from the top of the form. But even then, that's like a faff just to set that up. Like for the few clicks it saves you, it's just, yeah, get them. I mean, I know there's Mehdi's thing, like Mehdi's thing's great and all the rest of it, but it doesn't help you when you're setting it up like you're talking about now. It's kind of really frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, like things I've done in the past too is like also like I've tried just doing a copy and paste. So having a screen with my text field, my drop down, all those different options. And I would just delete everything in the card, paste it in, and then just update the card to update based on that new field. So that's kind of the other workaround I've done.
All right, thank you, Yusuf. I think there were a lot of good tips all throughout the session, and I think everyone is going to benefit a lot from all your kind of UX UI design tips. And I know everybody's following you on Twitter as well, so if you're not, make sure you go ahead and follow Yusuf. He has a lot of good, he has been putting a lot of stuff recently, so we have all been hooked onto it by all these great designs. This was just the beginning, I would say. So
yeah, thanks. I hope it was helpful. It was kind of hard to pick something to go over that would be.
No, this is this is great. It's actually good to kind of see you make something and how you think, because more than exactly seeing all the apps, it makes more sense to see how you're thinking when you are designing it. So, yeah.
And it's super helpful when you actually show it live. Like you take an existing app and you kind of rip it apart, and then you have a completely different look. I mean, we should have like a before and after look right now to see how you've transformed that one screen. It's just changed tremendously, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, like I like really doing things live because it lets people see it is actually easy, opposed to me just saying, boom, this is what it'll look like. Although it is scary when you're doing, I do a lot of online trainings, and when I go that approach, you pray that nothing breaks or you forgot what you were doing. But at least you get to see that, even when you forget something, you can see how someone will go about solving it. So it just makes it a little more real for everybody.
Yeah, and it's almost like there are not a lot of colors. You have a dark color for the background, and there's like a white color for popping out those blocks, and then you're using about 2 to 3 font sizes and simple icons. So it was very useful to actually walk through with you and actually look at how you transform it from your thought process. Well, thank you for taking the time to join our Hangout today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
All right, that's quickly. I know we are almost on top of the hour, so let's talk about all the great conferences coming up. I'll start off with the one coming on Saturday. If you are around the Cincinnati area, the SharePoint Saturday. John Levesque is taking the keynote. I'm doing some sessions on the app builder, and Anton is also going to be there. He's gonna. Don't know what was your session?
Oh, he just did my session here, so it was customizing SharePoint forms and Power Apps.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got someone to chase. All right. So thank you. Yep.
Then
Yep,
next
and
week
then-
we have a summit. So go
Yes,
ahead, Geeta.
we do. No, I was just going to say, yeah, we have the North American Power Platform Summit next week, and Daniel Christian put out a vlog that actually is a comprehensive list of things you must know if you're attending the summit, and I think that's definitely a must watch, and I'll share the link for that as well. And then we have the big Microsoft event Ignite coming up
In
next
November.
month.
Yep.
Yeah, in November, and then, oops, looks like I pasted them twice. And then we have the Power Platform World Tour. You can visit the site to look at the different locations within the U.S. We have Portland, Phoenix, Anaheim, and San Diego coming up for this year.
And we've also got the Thrive conference in Slovenia, which is the Eastern European, and I've heard it described as the most pleasant conference. It's the conference for, connoisseurs of conferences.
You know,
I know you can have that, like
I guess.
raucous party at Ignite, but I'm a bit more refined. I'm going to Slovenia.
Oh, yeah, whatever, dude.
I got my teacup. We're gonna go and stick my little pinky finger out and stuff.
Yes.
The way you defined, I thought you probably were not going for that, and that's why.
I was invited by Penny Coventry, and she said it's just the most delightful place. And I thought I'd let you kids go and do Ignite because I'm getting too old. So you go to the ice bar and do all that crazy kid stuff. Gonna go and hang out with the grown-ups. Get my walking stick out.
All right. Guess.
Yeah, if I could share one thing.
Yeah.
If you guys know Donna Sarkar from the.
Oh, yes.
Well, she was from Windows Phone, and then she went to the Windows Insiders team, and now she's advocating for the Power Platform. I want everybody to let her know which people from the Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, Power BI communities she should follow. I mean, she's going to be advocating on our behalf and making things connect together.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
she comes
Shout out.
in with she comes in with a great deal of expertise, and she's an amazing leader and an inspirational ambassador too. I can't wait to see what awesomeness she brings in for the Power Platform.
I got this funny feeling that her first Power App's going to be a scheduling thing, because like if you look at what she gets up to every day, it's like how on earth does she fit that into her life? It's in mind-blowingly incredible.
Let that be her second. She shared her first one, which was an app for imposter syndrome.
Yep.
Yeah, well, we all need that one. Every single one of us needs that bad boy. For sure. Yeah.
All right. I guess thank you.
Without licensing, I just wanted to point that out.
Oh yes.
We managed not to mention that at all. So
I was talking about that. Who said the L word?
That's a big achievement.
Well, it just consumed some API calls just mentioning it. So in fact, you just having the word power, that was an API call. So let's not get into that.
Oh yes, I think we missed mentioning. Thank you, Clifton. Do you want to unmute and explain about that comment that you have there?
All right. I guess the Power Apps Bonanza is coming up soon as a part of the Power Apps community call. I don't recall all there are 4 or 5 people who are gonna show their great apps.
Yeah, we
Daniel
have
as well.
Daniel is there, Brian is there, Reza is there. I don't remember the other 2. Can't remember the other 2. Yeah, I think we have. I'm gonna try and grab a link
Power
for
Apps
that.
blog, and we'll try to paste the link as well in the description when we post this video on the YouTube.
Is there something going on with Flow, like a Flow contest or something going on as well? Like a Flow or flop or something, I think it was. Or was that a session?
I think that's a session.
It's a session?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a session,
Yeah, I think there's supposed to be something going on with Flow, I think, but okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for
Oh, there
joining
it
us
is.
today.
Yeah.
Oh, there's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks for the link. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Samir,
Thank
for
you guys for
joining
joining.
us. Yeah, thank you for
Yes.
joining.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Hey,
Thank
Yeah.
Keith, can I ask you a question since you're still awake?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man. Barely,
So,
dude.
so
Barely.
Mr. Solutions, do you never use Flow from Power Apps in your solutions?
I desperately try not to use Flow in Power Apps for my solutions because I hate building the damn thing. I import it later on or something, but it's like this whole disable it, enable it, disable it, enable it, and it just drives me nuts. So I just package it up and write it down, but that's where it is, and it's not very good.
When's the last time you tried it? Because if you go to the Canvas editor and you go to Actions, it's gone right now. I think it's actually it's in tip, but in prod it seems to be missing. So, anyways, okay.
I'll have a little fiddle faddle, mate. I don't know if I can stay up much longer, man. I'm
No.
absolutely
I was just curious. I was just curious if you had a hack or something, but yeah. No. It's gone right now. Where the team's working on it. I'm just curious if you hadn't been using it in a while.
I was literally writing a flow today in a solution, extending the COE, and it came up and said I couldn't test it because my flow's not enabled. So I went and enabled it, and then it wouldn't save, and blah 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 blah. And I was like,
Yeah. You have to have it disabled to save it, and that's
but it's minor things, Chuck. It's minor things. Everything else.
Yeah, no, but it's just gone right now. If you go into Actions under your Canvas editor, it doesn't say Flow anymore.
Oh.
All right.
Oh.
I guess we'll say
There you go.
bye to everyone.
Okay.
Yep.
We gotta find
VP, hold on. I mean, you can hold on, but yeah, I'll stop the recording at least.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta go find that.
Come on.